Well, hey everyone. Welcome back to yet another edition of Status Checks with Chap and Pat. Just a quick 5 or so minute video about how you, as a first responder, can maintain your sanity. No gimmicks, no flashy graphics, just some straight talk from the heart. In the past editions, we've talked about emotional speed bumps, the power of positive self affirmations, the struggle of the first responder identity, and the importance of taking decompression breaks. All of these videos and the more videos that are going to come all have one common thread, and that is trauma. Because if there's one constant in our ever-changing jobs, it's the trauma that we're faced with day in and day out. But here's the interesting thing about trauma that we're exposed to. Very little of it is actually our trauma. Think about it. Unless you on-view something, which does happen, the trauma that we see has already taken place. And when we respond to it, we're being told a story of what happened by the witnesses and the circumstances that we see. That's what we call indirect trauma. And it's labeled as secondary traumatic stress, the impact we feel after hearing about a patient or victim's story or experience. Vicarious trauma is a shift in our attitudes and worldview after prolonged exposure to these stories. This is why we sit with our backs to the wall when we go into a restaurant, and we're always looking for threats everywhere we go. But that's not the topic of today's Status Check with Chap and Pat video. No, today I want to talk about what to do after experiencing the direct trauma and the resulting emotional imbalance, aka post-traumatic stress. Now, the last video we talked about the importance of getting your head back in the game by taking a decompression break. Today I want to talk to you about what you need to do when you go home after your shift is over, which is why I'm filming this from my home. All right, post-traumatic stress. What is it? The negative emotional experience that can occur following the involvement in or witnessing of a traumatic event, otherwise known as the bad call. Now, I'm not going to tell you what a bad call is because honestly, it's different for each of us. What is important to note, though, is that trauma is in the eye of the beholder. If you go to an incident and you are faced with some foreign or some sort of intense fear, a feeling of utter helplessness or horror, you've been exposed to a traumatic event. And that exposure is going to leave a lasting impact. That's why I call it the first responder sunburn. Listen, when you lay out in the sun and you get a sunburn, you're going to pay for it. It hurts. And it's going to hurt for a couple of days. But pretty soon you peel, then you tan, and then you're just pasty like you were before. But man, you never forget that sunburn. Experiencing post-traumatic stress is the same thing. You've been exposed to something that burns you. And for the next couple of days, it's going to hurt. You're going to have intrusive memories, which will include things like flashbacks and even nightmares. Sometimes something will trigger a memory, and you'll have a vivid recollection of what took place. For the next couple of days, you're going to do things to help numb yourself. You're going to do things to avoid triggering the memory reoccurrences. You're going to be hyper alert, easily startled, grouchy, right? You're not going to be your normal self. And do you know who's going to see it and be impacted by it? Your family. The ones closest to you that you spend your time with off duty. This is why it is absolutely critical that you have a plan for those days you're coming off a shift after that call. It's not only about your self-care. Honestly, it's about the health and wellness of your relationships and your family dynamics. So you need a plan for going home. Why? Because the next 24 to 48 hours, you're not going to be yourself. You're going to be short-fused, edgy, and emotionally and socially withdrawn. You're not going to have work to distract you, which means if you don't have some form of plan in place to keep you occupied and on task, you're going to find yourself sitting there, most likely with a beer. That doesn't go anywhere good. So, first off, you need to create this plan in advance, right? Ahead of time. You have to include your family. Your numero uno knows that when you call home and say something like, I had a bad shift, they know that the plan is being enacted. This means that schedules might need to be changed, that your home expectations might need to be placed on hold because you're going to need some time to process and disconnect so that you can reconnect with those home expectations. But it's going to take a little bit of time. When you get home, you're going to want to take some time to process your experience and the emotions that you're feeling about what took place. Processing means that you take time to acknowledge and to validate that what you experienced and are experiencing because of it is real and that you're okay, even if you don't feel like it. Remember the power of positive self-affirmations. Just don't lie to yourself. Acknowledge what is going on and be real. It's okay not to be okay. as long as you're doing something about not being okay. So, what does this mean? It means that you need to take time to process. The next 24 to 48 hours, I'm going to go back a slide. The next 24 to 48 hours, you need to do something that energizes you. Even if you don't feel like doing it, make yourself. You'll feel better for it. Talk to someone. Set an appointment with a best friend, with peer support, your work confidant. Tell the story. It will help your brain sort it all out. Now, absolutely a must is right here. It is imperative, very important that you follow a couple of these points, okay? Limit the amount of alcohol that you drink. Seriously, not going to help. In fact, it will only make things worse because it will impair your ability to process. I'm not saying don't drink. I'm saying be very careful and mindful of how much you drink. The fact is, it just doesn't help, all right? The other thing, sleep. Sleep deprivation will significantly degrade your ability to process. Why? Because you're impaired. Sleep, whatever it takes, even if you need to see a doctor to get something to help you sleep. Sleep. All right, the other thing you need to do is monitor your symptoms. If they're not getting better, if you can't stop thinking about it and the memories are becoming demons, then you really, really need to see someone who can help you move through the process, such as a therapist that specializes in trauma. Listen, nothing wrong with that. All right, so if you don't already have something like this in place, I truly hope you will consider it and that you will talk to those closest to you and come up with some type of a plan. Your plan is going to look different than mine, and that's okay because we're different. And self-care looks different to each of us. Remember, it's okay not to be okay as long as you're doing something about not being okay. All right, thanks for watching. See you on the next edition of Status Checks with Chap and Pat. Have a great day, y'all.